Welcome to the 90th episode of the Hail Married podcast. I'm A. Toves, and I'm joined by my husband, the Toves. We're back to review our gut-wrenching loss to Tulsa. Let's get started. Such a disappointing game. I mean, you want to talk about a tale of two halves? That first half, I just thought, wow, this is going to be a rout.
Yeah.
I was so wrong in my prediction. And then the second half happened.
You know, but were you wrong? I mean, I think you were hoping that it would, be the kind of good karma coming to UTSA football. But
Yeah.
I felt like deep down you knew something bad was going to happen. Like, I'm calling you more of a Nostradamus here because I feel like you thought, based on everything you've seen this season, that something bad could happen.
Yeah, I wanted them to prove me wrong, but I was concerned that something like this would happen. Now, I didn't think it was going to be these two very dramatic different halves,
Sure. And I mean, I'm sure that people that watched the first half thought, I can call it a game, right? Like,
Right.
I'm sure that they're going to go, that they're not going to do anything. And there's been some people that we actually kind of was able to speak to that said, oh yeah, I had to go to a wedding and I watched the first half and then I didn't see the second half at all. And then I decided, oh, well, let me see how bad they won and go there.
How much they beat Tulsa by, yeah.
And they're surprised when they see the score. It was like, what happened?
I mean,
and I think that's what encapsulates it, right?
Sure.
What happened?
Yeah, I mean, I took a little cat nap at halftime because I was feeling good. And I'm kind of concerned that the rest of the team took that cat nap with me, like, based on what happened.
Well, I mean, look, there was little mistakes in the first half, and
Yeah.
look, it was a good half, but to say that it was that best half, the best thing that they've done,
No.
stats wise, sure, but I think there was little mistakes, like going into the red zone at the goal line and on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 can't convert a touchdown. Things like that cannot get the push from your offensive line. Oh, haven't we said that before?
Right.
So let's look at real quick at some of the stats here from the first half. First half, the offense, 35 points, 364 yards, 104 yards rushing within that 364 total yards, 16 first downs, 55.5% on third down conversions. Remember that. 0 turnovers. How about the defense? Dominant. 7 points allowed. 100 yards total in the first half. 106 passing. -6 rushing. Let me say that again. -6 rushing. 8 first downs. They hold them to 22.2% third down conversions. 2 turnovers. Here's another stat I need you to remember here, Atos. 2 penalties on third down to give Tulsa a first down.
Mm-hmm.
4 penalties total in that first half, 40 yards. Didn't feel great because FAU was a total of 5 penalties. So you're like, okay, well, maybe there's going to be a slight increase, but we should be all right. Second half, we double the penalties. 8 penalties for 89 yards. Our offense isn't able to do anything. 10 points, 182 yards total, -1 rushing yards.
Yeah, sounds somewhat similar to the stats that you gave us for Tulsa in the first half. Like, Tulsa rushed for -6 in that first half. We rushed for -1 in the second half.
20% third down conversions. Didn't we just say that Tulsa had 22.2% in the first half? Like, did the teams just switch?
Yeah. It kind of feels like it, right?
Let's get to the defense because it gets even more egregious. 39 points, 333 yards, 264 yards passing, 69 rushing, 55.5% on third down conversions. That's exactly what UTSA did in the first half. They had 2 penalties on third down to give Tulsa a first down, and they had 1 penalty on special teams on an extra point that gave Tulsa the chance for a closer 2-point play opportunity, which they end up converting.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't convert, there's a good chance that they attempt a 2-point conversion after that last touchdown, but it doesn't really matter, right? Like, this just looking at this team overall in this game, you said it was a tale of two halves, but it just feels like that's been the journey, right? Like even for just UTSA under Jeff Traylor, which has been sort of a start out strong, looking great, and then we just find a way to falter. And that's what it's been like.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said it multiple times. We have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory.
Right.
On 3 occasions now.
Right.
ECU, Rice, and Tulsa. The 3 worst teams that we're going to play outside of Temple, in the conference.
ECU fired their coach.
Rice fired their coach.
Which we'll get to later.
Yeah, I mean, Tulsa's not going to fire their coach because he's only in his second year, and he's trying to do a turnaround, but...
It's a bad Tulsa team. We talked about it, repeatedly on our preview, that it's just not very good. So for UTSA to let their guard down, to not close out a game with a veteran team, please don't get caught up in this narrative that this is a young team. It's a veteran team with a young quarterback. And that young quarterback was not the cause of this. There were so many issues that happened during this game, and there just seem to be some recurring issues that we continue to see. But let me just give you a couple more stats just on this season. Obviously, it feels like another close loss, and it feels like, again, we have that karma coming back to hurt us, right? Like after winning so many of those close games in the last few seasons of Jeff Traylor's tenure, and all of a sudden it's catching up to us. Well, of course it's going to catch up to you, because at home, your offense is humming. I get it. Essentially, you have 2 FCS games. I'm going to count Kennesaw State as FCS because they're struggling to be an FBS team at this point.
But thank God they beat Liberty.
True.
Thank you, Kennesaw.
But then you played FAU, but you still have a team that's rolling at home. The defense is dominant. You're like, this is the team that we expected to come out and play on a week-to-week basis, or at least be some version of it. Putting up 479 yards per game, allowing 211. Like I said, there's some FCS mixed in there. But then you go on the road. Your penalties increase. Your offense, all of a sudden, they go down in yards per game, but they severely go down in terms of their points, because they come down to about 21.8 points per game. The defense has given up 42 points per game, double what you're scoring. I mean,
right.
Look, at home it was 37 points per game for the offense, 15.7 for the defense given up. Again, there was some FCS mixed in there, so you can't really take too much of it away from it, but the away stats are just so bad. You just can't convert on third down. You just can't keep the offense on the field, and the defense just can't seem to stop being a sieve. And, one of the things here, Atos, is the fact that we went through what I felt was like a vent session after Rice.
Right.
And we get almost the exact same place that we were after Rice.
Yeah. I mean, there literally was a moment in this game when we started to see Tulsa come back where I said to you, oh no, this is going to be the Rice game all over. And sure enough, it pretty much was. Now, granted, we had a chance there at the very end, but when they scored that last touchdown, it was like, it's Rice. This is everything that we saw there.
Look, we get that injuries played a part in this. Like, we're not, again, we won't want to minimize any of that. We totally understand. But there are things here that we've seen through the Traylor tenure that I think are important to discuss, because yes, we talked about him after Rice, but we're having another conversation about this, and it doesn't seem to be. I think really what's frustrating is there doesn't seem to be progress.
Right.
And if you're just going to look at road games, that's where you kind of have to see the progress, because that's where you seem to unravel completely. Whether it's getting blown out right away at Texas State, throw out Texas because, obviously you were going to lose that game. We were going to
lose that game no matter what, right?
But then you get to ECU and you play well in the first half, but you can't seem to really put them away. But we feel confident, and then the second half happens and everything falls apart. Rice, we look like we're dominating them. You know that you're much better than Rice, and then the second half comes and they completely fall apart with this long drive at the end to cap that win. Tulsa, doesn't belong on the field. And Kevin Wilson, the Tulsa head coach, knows it. He knows that he can't really compete with UTSA because he's been hamstrung. He's lost a lot of his guys to, I'm going to say the bad 3-letter word, but NIL. Yet somehow they come back in the second half, as we just described, and they just backbreaker once again. So with that, A-Tobes, I think we really just need to pivot away from the game, and we need to talk a little bit about this Traylor tenure.
Yeah, I mean, look, with this game, there's excuses of injuries, which I get, like you've mentioned. There are legitimate injuries, right? There's a couple of questionable calls.
Sure.
You can talk about, I think it was Jamori Robinson, he touched the quarterback on the head, didn't really hit him, but again, that's going to get called. And then apparently NIL has now entered the conversation as an excuse for the poor play, not just in this game, but this season in these away games. And the reality really is our coaching staff just hasn't been able to get the most out of the talent on the field.
Right.
It's not NIL. Now, is NIL a factor at UTSA in football and in many other pieces of athletics? Absolutely. But NIL is not the reason you didn't win these road games. If you can't develop and put your talent in the right position to win, that's coaching. That's not NIL. We have a talented roster. You can't honestly tell me that Tulsa's roster was more talented than the kids that we had on the field.
Correct.
It's not the case.
Correct.
And what I'd like to say to Jeff Traylor is, I thought you said you had the culture of the triangle of toughness, not the triangle of excuses. It just feels like when you have these conversations, particularly when you bring up NIL as a reason for some of the things that have gone wrong this season, you're either trying to deflect and blame the fans, the donors, the city, the companies that haven't given you enough money. Or, if you look at the players, how are you supposed to feel if you're a player right now who's supposed to be giving all of your effort to this team? Because you're implying that if you had more money, you could have bought better talent than the kids that you have on the roster today.
Thank you.
How does that feel?
That is a perfect point. And that's the part that I think really eats at me, because your job as a coach is to go out there and coach these guys up. Doesn't matter who you have left. This is the roster you put together.
Right.
Outside of NIL, you went and evaluated and said, with your assistant coaches, these are the guys that can come to UTSA and be prosperous. They're going to help our program continue to elevate.
Yeah, and in these games, ECU, Tulsa, Rice, we had more talent.
Absolutely.
And yet, we struggled and we lost those games. So it's not that Rice and Tulsa and ECU had bought all of this talent. That's not the case. You have talented kids, and don't devalue them. And I hope that that's not how they feel. Because, again, you need them to give their best effort. You need them to stay.
It's certainly an embarrassing moment for Jeff Traylor to really, and here's the thing, it's him just bringing it up or being asked about it. And the reason I say being asked about it, it's you could have just deflected that question away.
Right.
And he eventually does after he gives the NIL excuse.
Right.
But that's not what the fans want to hear.
Well, frankly, I know that's not what he intends, right?
Well, sure.
He's not intending to make it sound like he's blaming the fans or saying his team isn't talented, but that's what's being perceived by people on social media, and that's not giving a good look to the program. Not
at all. And like you said, that ends up getting back to the team. However he thinks that it does or doesn't, that they shut down during the season, that's not what happens. We know that. We know he's taped tweets to his players' chairs before games. We've got proof that actually has happened. So don't tell me that outside you don't bring it in yourself to try to motivate your team.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. When people said last year that Traylor would be the best coach for A&M, I told you right away, that's a bunch of crap. He is not. He is not a P4 coach. And this season shows more and more why he's not. Because there are certainly reasons why A&M would have gone after Jeff Traylor if they felt like he was the perfect guy to elevate them. They've got the perfect guy. They found him in Mike Elko. And one of the things that I read in an athletic article was the fact, what did Mike Elko do? He didn't talk about NIL. He didn't talk about any of these other things. He focused on the field issues, things that kept screwing over A&M over and over. There was discipline. There was attention to detail. Those are the things that Jeff Traylor really hasn't been about. And the thing is, that's why he's not going to get a P4 look.
Yeah.
We can talk about it as much as you want, but look, he's unable to resolve the issues in the field. We see the same issues that we're talking about. We'll talk about here in a second. Same things we talk about all season. He's got way too much loyalty to his coaching staff. Big programs see that. You haven't had any of your coaches really get poached. And when you have, it's been you had Barry Lundy get poached. You had Will Stein get poached. But since then, who else has really left? Rod Wright.
But Rod Wright was also, a coach. He was the only coach that came from the Wilson era over to the Traylor era.
Thank you. He really wasn't a Jeff Traylor coach. He will tell you that these guys are sought after. But as much as he talks about NIL and the money being thrown at his own players, why does he never, ever say, this is what's being thrown at my assistant coaches? I mean, he's really willing and able to freely tell you how much was thrown at Joe Evans. And it always increases every single interview, right? Goes from like $2 to $1 million, like by the end of the day.
$650, $675, but
whatever.
Sure.
But whatever, right? But it's always the redirection of issues from the normal talking points. And that in itself is what always has irritated me about him, is that you can be so good at the mic. You can be honest. And early in his career, he was. And that's what we really liked about him. And he's a good coach. Don't get me wrong. All of these things that I'm saying, he's still a good coach. But he's not that
He's not an elite coach.
Yeah, that great coach. And we've talked about the fact off the pod of what does great coaching look like and what does good coaching look like. And yes, great coaches do talk about NIL. But you know what they don't do is they don't bring it up and keep making a talking point to make sure that everybody understands the only way to keep my team together is this. Nobody talks about that. So let's circle back to what these issues are here.
Because Coach Traylor did outline 3 issues in his Monday press conference he attributed to why he's been losing on the road. And I 100% agree with him. But I also think that these are 3 issues that we have seen throughout his tenure.
Right.
They're not just problems this year. First and foremost, inability to run the football.
In 2020, when he first came on, we rushed for 2,585 yards. It has steadily decreased. 2585 in 2020, 2569, 21, 2454, 2233. And to date, after 8 games in 2024, we're at 1,094. We're not going to get to that 2,000 yards unless we have 4 amazing games where we rush the ball for over 250 yards a game. The rushing average per rush has dropped from a high of 2020 of 5.2 to date, it's 3.5 yards per carry.
Yeah.
You can't extend drives. You can't help your quarterback. You bog down your offense.
Right.
The other thing is the undisciplined penalties on defense. Earlier I said, hey, opponent first downs via penalty is a big thing. Since 2020, the numbers are 30, 26, 28, 20, and that's for the full seasons. To date, after 8 games, it's 29. We're going to go well over that high of 30 in 2020. That means we're still extending drives, guys. Like that right there is so killer.
Absolutely. And it, seems like they come at the wrong time.
Every single time. Single time. But again, we're painting the picture that it has been undisciplined. But remember, we had the good times. And those good times when we were winning the conference championships, maybe we brought this up. But nobody wanted to hear that because it's like, well, despite that, we still won. And we did carve out the same type of stories at times. All right, you guys want us to be positives? Yes, in spite of these issues, we still found a way to win.
Yeah, and let's not forget giving up big plays in the secondary.
Yeah, but in spite of all that, it's still, those issues still persist, and now you're losing. And in many cases, you're losing because of these issues.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't fix them when times were good, so they never went away, and now they're amplified.
Right. So.
Well, we're about to see what kind of leader Coach Traylor is, because he's going to have to make some very difficult decisions at the end of the season to make sure that one bad year doesn't turn into two. And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he needs to fire everybody. I'm not even saying he needs to fire anyone specific. He needs to be the one to evaluate that. He needs to decide if he has the right people and the right seats on the bus, or if they're even on the right bus. But he's going to have to really take a very hard look at these people who have been coaching for him for years, who in some cases are related to him. And he's going to have to make decisions about whether or not they're the right people to elevate UTSA. And that's going to take a lot of managerial courage. I had an old boss who might have called that intestinal fortitude. But it's going to take a really hard look. And we're going to find out whether or not he's going to do that. Is he going to make those tough decisions?
I would say that for those of you that immediately have picked up on what Atovs kind of said, which was talking about potentially firing his offensive line coach, which would be his brother, Kurt Traylor, I would love to tell you that I could do it. It sounds easy to say, but when you're staring across the table
at Thanksgiving dinner,
or just staring across from him after the end of the season and you're doing your end of the season evals, are you really looking over there and saying, it's over?
Yeah.
It's easy to say. Again, it's easy to say. All of us can fire Kurt Traylor because he's not our brother.
Right.
But put your own brother, your own sibling, whether it's sister too, in front of you. Heck, even put in one of your parents. That's regardless how you feel, it's the most difficult decision to make. And again, we're not saying to fire him, but if he gets to that position, can he do it? Can he look at some of his other coaches that have been quote unquote loyal to him this entire time? I don't know. But what is needed, and I think this is where you're going, he needs some infusion of ideas and talent from the outside. This has grown stale.
Yeah.
We run the same offense, the same defense, and we need people from the outside to come in here and to say, hey, when we ran into these problems, this is what we did there. And the coaches that maybe you could jettison, you've always told me, you can go somewhere else. See what they have to offer, see how they handle certain things, and then come back.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to be honest with someone and tell them they're not ready for the role they have right now, or maybe they're not ready for the next role, and they need to leave and get that experience somewhere else and come back. And, you know, promoting from within is great when you have someone ready, but in a lot of cases, you're making a decision because it's easier or it's cheaper, and those aren't the right reasons to make decisions.
Correct.
And, you know, I think that we may have some cases of those on our staff. And maybe it's better to let those people leave the organization, get some different experience at different schools, and then, who knows, come back later on. Or bring in some other talent from the outside who can help show them a different way to do things.
Well, I hope that he does at least consider it and make some changes to how he approaches certain pieces of the offense, the defense, and the special teams. Because at some point, I think whether you want to or not, you're going to have to get refreshed with those ideas.
Right.
And if you don't, you're going to stagnate. And that's how, as you kind of mentioned before, how one bad season becomes 2 and 3 bad seasons.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you're stuck in a hole where you can keep talking about NIL, you can keep talking about facilities, you can keep talking about all these other things that need to be funded. And everybody's going to just tune you out because they're going to say, we gave you as much as we could and you still asked for more, and now you're losing.
Yeah. Before we close this section, I know there are a lot of fans out there that are saying they don't want to go to any games the rest of the season. And look, you can fan however you want to fan, but just remember, when you stop coming to the games and supporting the team, you're really hurting the players, not the coaches or the administration. Those players, those student athletes need your support now more than ever. They need the crowd to lift them up and encourage them to finish out the season strong. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about whether or not you're going to make the decision to go to the game.
Very well put. All right, we're going to probably go quick on some of these things, but special teams, overall I thought we played well. I mean, okay, we blew those 2 timeouts on special teams in the second half on, 4th and 3. We didn't have the right play, so we were going to go ahead and kick the field goal, but then Traylor said, nope. I rethought it again and I called timeout. I don't have that much of a problem with it. Fair enough. It's kind of like we almost iced Tate again, right?
Right.
Jeez.
Fortunately, we gave him a couple of plays in between so that when he did end up having to kick the field goal, he was good.
Yeah. But still, issue, right? And then there was an apparent jersey violation on the kickoff, or it could have been a jersey violation on the kickoff because you had the 2 guys with the same number on. And, of course, they looked at injuries. But I got to go back to Zach Brown. That's what you're supposed to be taking care of. If you're looking ahead and planning ahead, wouldn't you be planning ahead knowing I'm missing this guy, so we're gonna bring Andrew in, and Andrew's gonna be playing this position. Oh wait, she's got the same number as Ben. Okay, we're gonna have to do something about that.
Right.
And we've got only 10 seconds to figure it out. Hey Jeff, this is what's going on. But it feels like, again, like there's disarray with Traylor, there's disarray with the coaching staff. You run into problems here on special teams, but got to give props to our boy Cale Hogan here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like the Rice game, Cale has a great punt in the 4th quarter. He pins our opponent the other end of the field. Unfortunately, our defense couldn't stop him, but we talked a lot about punting and the concerns that we had, and we're seeing the growth in Cale, throughout these games. This was actually the longest career punt for Cale, and it was the first time that we'd had a punt go 60-plus yards since Lucas Dean had a 67-yard punt against Troy in the Cure Bowl. So, again, you're seeing this growth in Cale, and unfortunately, I think we need to see that growth in Cale to help put us into better positions.
Well, I mean, you're looking at the special teams. Now you have a place kicker, reliable now, that is hitting his field goals. You've got good kickoffs from Tate. He's continually getting touchbacks. Like I was looking at, I was stats nerds, guys, and I was going back and trying to see how many kickoffs he's had and how many were touchbacks, and it's pretty much a high percentage. It's terrific, right? That does wonders for your kick coverage, right? When you don't have to worry about a big return if he's getting touchbacks. And you see the growth with Cale Hogan. Things are looking bright in the special teams. Now, if we could only get our coverage teams to clean up their stuff, this special teams unit could actually be pretty good. But
certainly gives you hope for next season.
Yes, it certainly does. All right, let's get to the offense. The key to the victory I had was use the run to set up the play action. Well, we really couldn't establish a run. Actually, we did establish it in the first half. We were doing well. But I never really saw those runs for Owen.
Right.
I wonder if there was a concern, but that's just me just kind of guessing right now. But, man, I mean, the second half, rushing for -1 yards. Like, when I saw that on Sunday and I really looked at the stats and was like, are you kidding me? There's -1 yards.
Yeah. How did we think that we were going to win with those kinds of stats?
Exactly. Like, I mean, I'm just flabbergasted. Like, we've already talked about the inability to run,
Yeah, ad nauseum, but
throughout. Yeah. And it just, the thing is that it hurts your quarterback because now you're putting your young quarterback in a position where he has to throw. And one of the things I was talking about in our preview was run the ball, be able to run the ball, because if you can do that, you can honestly, you can keep the defense off the field from committing any silly penalties. But more importantly than that, it helps Owen. Like, he's got to have that consistent run game. Frank had it early in his career, but Owen unfortunately doesn't have that. So I think we're lucky that Owen has been able to really pass well, because
yeah.
if not, this could really get ugly. But you had Owen McCown set a new school record with 434 passing yards, going 30 for 50 with 4 touchdowns.
I mean, you would think that when you talk about setting a new school record, that would be in a victory.
Yeah.
I mean, we've just put the team on Owen's arm, and it's not realistic. I mean, he got honorable mention from the AAC for the offensive player. Just a couple of situations, both on defense, both on special teams, both, the run game. If we could have just fixed like 10 different things, that would have been the offensive player of the week. And instead of Cooper Lagasse winning the AAC offensive player of the week, we'd be talking about Owen.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
He's an absolute bright spot, but you can't expect him to do everything. He's not Superman.
Right. That fumble, scoop, and score in the second half, there's a observation by Greg Luca. I remember that Robert Henry had kind of nicked himself up. And I just, when you're kind of watching the game at times, you see something like that happen and you don't really kind of put things together. But apparently there was supposed to be a quick screen over to the right-hand side for Owen. But Greg was right. Owen was talking to Robert Henry after that. Robert Henry was kind of limping. It was clear, because I was trying to figure out, why did Owen hold the ball so long? Like, that's supposed to be a quick pass. Well, now you have Robert Henry, who clearly doesn't want to throw to, because he's like, you're injured. Like, I can't, I'm not going to risk you out there. Like, it doesn't make sense. So I'm going to hold the ball a little bit longer. I'm going to look for Willie McCoy. What the problem is that the blocking scheme isn't set up for him to hold that.
Mm-hmm.
More so, you can't have your right tackle completely whiff on a block and just lay down like that. That's a problem, right? And if you don't know what we're talking about, just look on Twitter, because it's going around. It's just a bad look. But again, it's this offensive line. Like, there's got to be more discipline. Like, you can't. You got to be able to have some push, and there has, like we talked about before, there has been no push. Hence, why you end up with, when you're trying to ice a game and finish it out in the second half, and you run for -1 yards, there's just no way you're going to close out that game. So, otherwise, again, the tight end stepped up. But I mean, the reason the tight end stepped up is because their wide receivers are banged up, right? Like, there's got to be
exactly.
It's got to be something. And certainly, Owen wasn't perfect, but I felt like the tight ends played well. But I will say, Greg kind of brought this up when he was talking with JJ on, they do their recaps. He saw the same thing I think a lot of us have seen, and that's 2 tight ends blocking 1 guy, which is fine if you've only got 1 defender out there on a screen, but you can't have both of them blocking the same guy, because what ends up happening is you're missing the other guy,
right?
And that guy gets through and stops us for a loss or a really short gain.
Right.
Overall, again, like I said, receiving wise, our tight ends really stepped up. I think this team's got a lot of good tight ends. Hunter Thomas, Patrick Overmeyer, Dan Dishman. Oscar Cardenas got a touchdown early in the game, then got injured. Haven't really heard what that injury was.
Right.
But let's be honest, not that Oscar is expendable, but you have 3 other options. So It's not like you put yourself in a corner if Oscar's out, but you do lose some experience.
Sure. And again, Willie McCoy and Chris Carpenter, yes, they had drops in the game. They made some mistakes, but the 2 of them have been pretty consistent, specifically Chris Carpenter. I mean, I think, again, when you look at the wide receivers, he's probably been the most consistent wide receiver all season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get to the defense. Keys to victory: play discipline, contain defense versus the running quarterbacks. I'm going to start with this. First of all, so you asked, I think the question you were wondering was, did we not game plan well for Cooper Legas? He gets named the AP National Player of the Week for that big comeback against us. But I want to go back to what you said during the preview. Because you said, this is going to be tough for Jess Lepp and Jeff Traylor to game plan. Because we really don't know what quarterback's going to be out there. And had we not knocked Kirk Francis out of the game, this game probably doesn't take off. Like, this game does not get out of hand for UTSA, most likely, because Kirk Francis did not look like he could really move or avoid this UTSA defense. So you got a running quarterback. That's always been the Achilles heel for this UTSA defense ever since Jess Lepp has been here. We held him to 46 yards on 13 carries. Let's be clear. That was just enough, I think, to spook the defense and Jess Lepp.
Mm-hmm.
13 for 46 doesn't sound terrible. Could they have game plan better for him? I think that they were fine. It's just the situational calls that I think were a problem. Would you not agree with me that that has been a problem during the Jeff Traylor tenure as well?
Yeah. And, again, he said as much today on his press conference that there have been issues play calling in specific situations. And again, those are the times where, unfortunately, we let a big play happen and it turns the tide either in terms of momentum or it's that back-breaking, game-winning, touchdown.
The toughest thing to see was Parker Stats of War on Twitter, because he does the net success rates. And did we really get beat as bad as we think we did, right? And you see how well UTSA succeeded with the ball, and you see how badly Tulsa did, yet Tulsa wins. And, of course, some of the thing is, well, what were the causes? What was the big plays? Just like you said, it was those big plays,
explosive plays
that did it. But otherwise, this defense played rather well. Going back to your situational, Jeff brought this up during his press conference this morning, and a lot of it was around, hey, we blitzed too much against Rice, and now, you're killing us because we decided to kind of zone and, help out our young cornerbacks, in that last drive. But therein lies the problem. You blitz too much against E.J. Warner. But how many times have I told you, and we even talked about on the pod during the Temple review and last season, and then the Rice one this season, was he's very good. E.J. Warner is very good at nullifying the blitz by getting the ball out quickly.
Right.
You don't blitz E.J. Where we always would get him was we would just rush the four, and then we would play like a zone behind there, and that would force EJ, actually, I should say, to hold the ball longer, and we'd get the sacks. Against Cooper Legas, I get it that he's a running quarterback, but at the end of the game, let him run. Like, if he's the one running out, that's okay, because that means he left the offensive line behind, right? That's what's happening. But instead, we allowed essentially where I think you should have blitzed a little bit more. And again, it's all situational. So I know Traylor got a little huffy about that, but I mean, the thing is that you have to recognize those situations too. You can't just be saying, well, the last time we did this, so this time we're just going to, like, it's not just.
Yeah, I mean, E.J. Warner and Cooper Legas are not the same person.
Exactly.
Tulsa and Rice are not the same teams. And I think the thing that was frustrating about how they handled that situation in Rice was, to your point, we've played E.J. before. We should know what worked and what didn't work. We were successful the first time. Why did you change the game plan this time? It's like, did you not go back and look at what you did and you were successful in the last game?
Same defensive coordinator. It's not like we changed defensive coordinator. So,
and again, Cooper Legas is a different person, he has different strengths. So why did you just kind of say like, oh, well, maybe we should have done this against EJ, so we're going to do it against Cooper or Lega and think it's going to work?
Again, going back and reiterating we need some fresh ideas.
Yeah. But in the bright spot on defense, we did have those 2 big turnovers, the strip sack caused by Triplet that was recovered by Ligon, and then the other that was caused by Ligon and returned for a touchdown by Damian Wimberly. That scoop and score was the first scoop and score that we've had since Lorenzo Dantzler's return versus Middle Tennessee back in 2021.
Kind of nuts, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to believe that it's been that long since we had a scoop and score.
Look, the defense has struggled because there's been some injuries. Obviously, we could go through and list them all, but we won't. Just know that in terms of the secondary, it's pretty much decimated now. Like, we don't know who will be out there. And, we could be sitting here just trying to figure out, like, who's going to show up for Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, I'm honestly concerned about who's going to be left on the roster in our secondary when we get to the point of playing West Point. I mean,
yeah. It's
going to be a little sketchy.
The injuries are bad, and that's we don't want to minimize that. But I think most of all here, I think what we have outlined hopefully has been the need for offensively to be some changes, at least in the way things are done, because again, saw the same issues creep up, and defensively, we're outlining again what those issues were that we're still seeing 5 years later.
All right, so let's move on to the Memphis preview. You've called Memphis affectionately the Toyota Corolla of the American Conference.
I don't know why. We had a Toyota Corolla, but it was dependable, right?
It was a nice, long, dependable car.
And Memphis is dependable. Honestly, they will get you the hope of longevity in terms of winning, which for the most part, it's not like they've missed many bowls. But it's also not a very exciting, I think, program. And that's why I felt like Toyota Corolla, you don't always see it as a very exciting. It's dependable. Yeah. It's just not very exciting. And that's just not how I think their fans try to portray Memphis.
Right.
And I think how even their administration tries to portray Memphis.
Sure. I mean, they think they're P4 ready, but the reality is they're a good team. But they're not a great team.
They're not.
They're very, very veteran. This should have been their year. I mean, we talked about that earlier. Like, everything on paper said this was Memphis's year. But who are we talking about as being the title contenders? Army, Navy, and Tulane. Not Memphis.
Right. But, I mean, that was it last season, too. It was, SMU, it was Tulane, and then UTSA. Maybe Memphis. Yeah. And Memphis was seen as sort of a contender, but then got knocked off. But that to me is just the epitome of Ryan Silverfield. He's in his 5th full season as a head coach. His overall record is 38-20, and he's gone 17-4 last season and then this season so far because they're coming in 7-1. Man, that sounds terrific. But if you're not even close to sniffing a conference title or putting yourself in the national conversation to get into potentially the college football playoffs, and I don't see this team being that.
Yeah.
That 17-4 record doesn't matter. Like it doesn't feel like it's
good, but it's not great.
Right. All right, you got the offense. I mean, look, yes, they've scored 34.1 points per game, but you kind of feel, and here we go again with the good but not great, because that's where I really kind of want to go, because I love the way you put it. You've got Seth Hennigan. Doesn't he feel like the epitome of good, but just not great quarterback?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, senior quarterback, again, he's been reliable. I mean, 64% on the season in terms of completions, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. It's good.
But you feel like he should be doing more, right? Because he's been there for 4 seasons. We played him back in 2021 there in Memphis. He was infamously within that Memphis comeback that UTSA had in Jeff Traylor's 2nd season as head coach, where we came back and won 31-28. That to me was the epitome of Memphis is
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Memphis too is that, you watch their games, and a lot of them that they've won have been closer games. And you just feel like they should be really putting teams away, not struggling against teams like Charlotte,
They're just so up and down. And
Yeah.
that to me is what I think, we talked about UTSA and their problems, but here you have a senior quarterback, and you kind of feel like they shouldn't have those peaks and those sharp peaks and low valleys. Like they should be, with Seth Hennigan, be in a different spot to be able to say, no, we're national contenders. We're going to blow out some teams. And they haven't, because they're not really buttoned up. We'll get to that in a second, but running back is Mario Anderson Jr., 104 rushes for 639 yards, 6.1 average, 12 touchdowns. Guy's a hoss, man. Put up, I think, 4 touchdowns. I think it was the last 2 games ago against North Texas. Guy was just pounding North Texas over and over and over. And he got knocked out a couple times, but he just bounced right back up and came back in and started running. One of the things is, I think, obviously, I don't know how effective he's going to be. This UTSA defense is really stout against the run. And I'm not as concerned with Mario Anderson. I'm not saying that the guy can't have a big game, but to me, I think we need to talk about the wide receivers.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we just talked about, the threat of giving up big plays. So if that's going to happen, it's going to happen with some of these guys. Rock Taylor, he's a senior, 32 receptions for 448 yards. He averages 14 yards per reception, 1 touchdown. And then Demir Blankumsey, I guess that's how you pronounce his name. He's also a senior, 24 receptions for 314 yards, and he has 2 touchdowns.
Here's the thing. I'm going to go back real quick. One of the things you noted was the fact that you said, as much as I keep looking at this Memphis team, all I keep seeing is senior, senior, senior.
Yeah.
That in itself is why we keep wondering why this offense is so... It looks like it should be so much better than it really is. Their defense, though, has been somewhat elevated now. Jordan Hankins is their defensive coordinator. He was elevated from linebackers coach, but came to Memphis with previous experience as a defensive coordinator at FCS UT Martin.
Yeah, and he was actually lauded as a defensive coordinator there, to the point that when Dave Aranda was a defensive coordinator at LSU, he actually called Jordan Hankins, had him fly down to Baton Rouge and have a conversation with him about how he set up his defense, because he wanted to take some ideas. So when you've got LSU taking your ideas and you're at FCS UT Martin, you got to be pretty good.
Absolutely. But something we would love to see at UTSA, which is an FCS coach or coordinator elevate to one of our position coaches and then become the coordinator, right? All right. Well, they play the 3-3-5, but they like to shake things up. I think you were talking about the fact that, depends on their opponent.
Yeah, they definitely make a lot of changes on defense based on who they're playing, which is, one of the things that has helped to elevate them, this season. Again, they've really changed up their defense. It's been a bit tricky for some of the guys, but they brought in a lot of new transfers to kind of help with, making this transition. And, they were interviewing the head coach of UT Martin, and he said, it really makes it hard to scheme up against his defense because you're not exactly sure what you're going to get.
That's what you like to hear about a defense coordinator, right? Like, just bringing ideas to the table to put his players in the best position. And one of those players is cornerback Davian Ross, senior, 5'10". He's got 2 interceptions, 6 passes defended. You've got a transfer from Indiana, cornerback Kobe Minor. Both these guys pretty good. I'm not sure which one of these guys it was against North Texas, but one of them, again, here's where the not buttoned up really comes through. I mentioned at a previous pod episode that all they had to do was just knock the ball down. They went for the interception, fell through their hands, went right to the wide receiver, the UNT wide receiver, and they capitalized for a first down, which kept the drive alive. That's Memphis for you.
Yeah.
All right. But let's talk about real quick about their middle linebacker, Chandler Martin.
Yeah, he's someone who has been with the team now for a couple of years. He transferred into Memphis, but last season he spent under Hankins as the middle linebacker coach. And so these two have quite the connection. Chandler is the guy that's going to be, wearing the helmet, getting all the communication. He's their leading tackler at 52. He's also leading the team with 4 sacks. He has a forced fumble, an interception, and 3 fumble recoveries. He really is a beast out there, and someone that we're definitely going to have to keep our eye on.
Also need to keep an eye out on defensive lineman Javon Dennis, senior, 16 tackles, 1 sack, 1 fumble recovery. He's a transfer from Georgia State. And also defensive end William Whitlow. He's caused a lot of havoc off the edge. Plenty of quarterback hurries. This Memphis defense, I think, what I think makes it scary, if you're looking at it on paper, is the fact that when they play up to their potential, they're really good.
Yeah.
But to me, that's not often enough.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely, though, have been, I think, the difference in this season when you look at Memphis this season versus last season.
Yeah,
and maybe will be something that our fans aren't necessarily expecting if they're expecting, to see the Memphis that we've seen on television previously and outside of the season. On special teams, their kicker, Caden Costa, also a senior. He's been pretty inconsistent, though, about 58% field goals. He's missed 3 in the 30s, and both of his attempts over 50 yards. Really, 47 is his long right now. So I wouldn't expect to see a ton of long field goals. The punter, Joshua Salone, is a senior from Australia. I mean, he's pretty consistent, about 41-yard average. So, he's not necessarily the weapon that like we would have talked about from Lucas Dean in the past, but he's been pretty consistent.
All right, well, let's talk keys to victory. For the first one, I just want to say protect Owen. My concern in the last 4 games is that as these teams get more difficult, we just need to protect them. Like the last thing we would need is for him to suffer some sort of season-ending injury
or a concussion,
or something else. He got popped on that scoop and score that he gave up. He got popped hard, and it's a little bit his fault, but you understand why he held that ball so long. And sometimes I think him holding the ball, some of that sort of indecision or not wanting to get rid of it sooner, just an experience, but need to keep Owen upright. On defense, just stay disciplined throughout the game. This Memphis offense, much like the defense, as long as it plays up to its potential, can be explosive, can be very good. I just don't know what Memphis will get, though. And the worst thing we could do is continue to help them along by being undisciplined and committing some untimely penalties on defense. So let's stay disciplined and let's just see where everything, comes together for us on Saturday. All right, let's do a Hail Mary predictions.
Well, the Roadrunners have played well at home, and I expect that to continue. But we'll need an offensive showing like we saw in the first half of the Tulsa game to keep us competitive in this game. My concern is that the defensive injuries that we suffered against Tulsa are just going to make it a huge challenge for us to keep it close. I think that we will find a way to make this a close game, but unfortunately, I don't know that we're going to have enough in the tank to overcome a good but not great Memphis team. So give me Memphis 35, UTSA 31.
The funny thing is this is a winnable game because Memphis will notoriously play down to their competition. Don't believe the hype. Memphis isn't as good as you'd think they are. Yes, they have plenty of good players, but Silverfield can't seem to get the most out of these players, and he's been there 5 seasons. I wouldn't be surprised if Memphis stumbles against us or down the road, as you can't count on them, though I will happily say I'm wrong if they do succeed. This is all to say that I think that Owen will have a good game, but asking him to continuously win games with his arm this early in his career is not the right recipe, even this season. I don't know who will be rolled out as our cornerbacks, but I think they'll perform admirably because they're going to be right in front of their home fans. This UTSA team, I think, will show some fight. I think the score will stay close, but eventually Memphis pulls away. Give me Memphis 38-24 over UTSA. Okay, before we go, let's talk UTSA soccer. Tough road loss at South Florida, but like I said before, it was expected. The loss was 1-0. Certainly doesn't put UTSA in a very good position for the conference tournament. Would have loved to have come away with some points there.
Yeah.
We didn't get a chance to see the game. Obviously a lot going on. So sorry, I can't give you any good notes to come off of, but Charlotte has come on, and so has Tulsa. And that tells you just as much as, like I said right now, that UTSA does not control its destiny to get in the conference tournament. FAU is a must-win, and then you have to check the scoreboard because, unfortunately, Charlotte's going to play Temple, so that should get them 3 points. Though Temple has kind of come on lately, but not enough to, I think, be a real threat. Unfortunately, I think what we're going to end up seeing is a win against FAU, and I don't think the tiebreakers are going to fall UTSA's way because Charlotte and Tulsa, yes, we tied Charlotte, but we lost to Tulsa, and you don't want to end up tied with them is all I'm going to say. So next up, though, as I said, FAU is going to be Halloween night, 7 p.m. out at Park West.
I hear they're going to have candy, so you can trick or treat there.
That's awesome.
You can also dress up in your favorite costume. We will be UTSA soccer fans.
I thought about dressing up as Derek Pittman, but I don't think you'd appreciate that.
But you didn't want to shave your head?
Yeah, I don't want to shave my head. It'll also be on ESPN Plus before we get in trouble here. So tune in. It might be the last game of the season, but let's hope not. Let's hope that the girls can pull it out and get into the conference tournament.
In the AAC roundup, Memphis, as we mentioned before, barely beat Charlotte, 33-28.
They were looking ahead to UTSA. Big game.
Look, I feel bad for the Charlotte fans because I think they might be living with Biff Poggi for a little bit longer because it seems like Charlotte's found themselves a quarterback.
They've looked competitive. That's the problem, right?
I know. And, that quarterback may just extend his tenure.
That'd be rough.
Tulane beat North Texas 45-37. Chandler Morris went down with an injury to his arm. He came back in the game, but he just didn't look the same. So I'll be interested to see kind of what his long-term prognosis is and whether or not that really impacts him going forward.
And don't let the score, the close score, give it away here. North Texas, as they notoriously do, score a couple touchdowns really late in the game to make it look like it was a much closer game. It wasn't that close. Tulane and John Summerall are physical, and they're just beating down on opponents. Like you said, Chandler Morris goes down, and it wasn't much of a hit on his arm, but it's Tulane, man.
Yeah.
Wow, they're good.
Number 24, Navy, lost to number 12, Notre Dame, 51-14.
Saw it coming, man. Like that, Navy's good, but Notre Dame's just different, and they've been playing different this year.
Yeah, and then UConn beat Rice 17-10, and Rice fired Mike Bloomgren right after the game.
So Dana Dimmel is let go last season from UTEP, and now Bloomgren is gone. Dimmel and Bloomy. What am I gonna do? Like, who's gonna be my next head coach that I'm gonna focus on and be like, they really annoy me? Because the problem is these guys really annoyed me.
Yeah, I mean, I know you don't like the Memphis coach, but it's not really the same. I mean, I feel like it's going to be more Biff or Dilfer. I don't know.
Dilfer may be put out of his misery, but it might be Biff. Because I think we play them next season.
We do play them next season. Do we not? We don't play UAB next season, do we?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so definitely Biff, especially if Purdy, his quarterback, extends his tenure a little longer. In women's basketball, they're starting to gear up for the season. We'll be attending their practice session and the annual potluck tomorrow, so more to report on our next pod.
Yeah, pretty excited to see what they've got, especially during the practice session. Last season, you could tell some of the growth that some of the girls had, and hopefully we can find some good tidbits that we can share.
Yeah, it's always kind of a fun event because you get to not just meet the students, but meet their parents and kind of find out a little bit more about them. So definitely looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for us. So thanks for joining us on the Hail Married podcast. I'm A. Toves.
And I'm the Toves.
We'll be back soon to recap our game against Memphis.
Birds up.